Hey everybody, hope you guys are doing good today. Just out here in the tackle room, sort of in the process of shifting gears a little bit. Got the first tournament that I'm fishing of the year this coming up this week at Lake of the Ozarks. So I'm going to start getting everything ready for that. Probably going to start practicing for that tournament on Monday. And for today's YouTube tip, what I want to do is I was thinking about it, and I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start giving you guys some tips and hints that you can use in each month, and more specifically in each week of each month. Maybe some timely tips for your part of the country that's going to help you catch more fish right at the time we're talking about it. And today's topic, what I want to talk about, is one that I'm real familiar with, and that is, when do you decide to put down the jerkbait and pick up the crankbait in the early pre-spawn, specifically like the first part of March, like we're getting ready to get into. And a lot of this has to do with, the weather patterns, environmental conditions in the lake that you're fishing. But there's always this, the bass are constantly changing as far as their behavior and their movements and personalities. And those changes are affected by external variables as far as in the daylight hours, the wind and weather, certain weather patterns, lake levels. There's a lot of different variables that really determine, when bass move and when they sort of shift their personality and start getting on different lure categories. And one of the most significant ones, in my opinion, is in the early pre-spawn, when those fish start getting off the Alabama rigs and the jerkbaits, and they start making a move more to like the crankbaits and the jigs. And so that's what I sort of want to talk about today and give you guys some tips on that. So first of all, you have to sort of ask yourself, when does this happen? And a lot of times you can get sort of tricked into thinking this is going to happen based upon, water temperatures a lot of times. And water temperature plays a part of it too. But one of the things I just want to, reiterate and stress in a lot of these videos here, particularly when you're talking about spring fishing and pre-spawn fishing like we're in right now, much of that is in motion that doesn't have anything to do with water temperatures. The things that set it in motion, like I said, are the daylight hours, different angles of the sun as far as, the tilt of the earth and everything. All that stuff comes in sort of like a primal dance, it's an instinctual, intuitive move that the fish make. Everything is geared towards feeding and reproduction in the natural world, and that's what the bass are too. They're looking for their optimum conditions to move up and spawn and to give themselves the best odds of successful spawn, which means feeding up prior to when they start spawning. And that's why there's so many big bass that are caught in the pre-spawn at the time of the year. But anyway, back to today's topic. It's like, when do you know when to put the jerkbait and the Alabama rig down and start picking up this crankbait? Normally what happens in this is there's a time frame, usually in the first part of March, when you start getting that first vibe or that first feel of spring. And usually it's signaled by, you'll get a day or two of unseasonably warm weather. Like, it can be cold for a while, and then all of a sudden you'll get a day or two that's like 10 or 15 degrees above normal. And then sometimes you'll start seeing a daffodil pop up in the yard. Some type of signal or some type of life that signals that spring is on the way. Sometimes the buds can start getting a little fatter in the trees. Something like that. When that first starts to happen, and when that first unseasonably warm snap happens, it doesn't have to last very long. To me, that is a big signal when I start thinking about that. And while you can still catch suspended fish on a jerkbait all the way up through the time the fish get on the beds, you don't have all those big groups of fish that are suspended out over deeper water, over ditches, over points, over secondary points, all this type of stuff. They begin making a movement into the shorelines a little bit. And you don't really have to have warming water to trigger those fish up there. It has to do with more, we're entering the March phase. We're getting closer to the spawn. Those fish know that even though it may be cold out, you may have a cold snap, they know warm weather's on the way. It's just a matter, it's coming. And those fish are coming to the bank, with that too. And this is the time of year they start, concentrating on feeding on crawdads really heavily. So normally what I do is when I first start seeing that that indication of spring is on the way, that's when I start going away from my jerkbait a little bit, and I start picking up my crawfish, crawdad pattern crankbaits, or just shad patterns or whatever, expecting those fish to be up on the bank. For example, we're getting ready to go to this Lake of the Ozarks tournament. The lake still has ice on it right now. It was frozen solid last week, and there's still, I don't even know if you can launch a boat up there right now. There's still, ice in all the coves. But but 2 days ago, even though it was record low temperatures a week and a half ago, 2 days ago, we had a 72-degree day. It was literally 80 degrees warmer in 1 week. We had 13 below zero a week and a half here. 2 days ago at 72. So we had an 80-degree swing in the temperature variation. When you get a swing like that in the pre-spawn, that is a signal for those bass to move shallow. So like one of the things that I'm looking for at Lake of the Ozarks, I'm looking for those fish to still be on a jerkbait a little bit, but I'm looking for the crankbait bite or the jig bite to start developing, simply because we had that first snap of warm weather, and it's starting to get March. So when I go up to that tournament, for example, I'm not even going to pay much attention to the water temperature. I'm going to be basically letting the fish tell me if those fish are up there or not by fishing shallower. So what you want to do a lot of times with that is, when it starts to get into that transition period, start moving away from the points. The ditches and the points where you've been fishing when it was colder, start moving away from those areas and start looking for those staging areas that the fish are going to move up on. The staging areas are your steep banks, your channel swings, your main lake bluffs, that type of stuff, bluff ends, any type of steep area that is adjacent to some type of a spawning area. And when I'm talking about a steep area being adjacent to a spawning area, I'm not talking about it being just, 100 yards away. I'm talking about it could be like a quarter mile away, but it's still relative to the way that deeper water staging area is positioned close to these major spawning areas. That's what you want to look for. And that's when the crankbait starts coming in good, is when those situations come up, those fish start moving on those steeper banks. They start suspending less. They start hitting that, 5 to 8 foot zone on the bottom, looking for any type of broken rock, rock transitions. It can be mud or clay if you have that in your lake, but there's got to be deep water next to that with shallow water spawning bays or coves adjacent to that somewhere. So anyway, to answer your question, when do you know when to put down the jerkbait and start going to the crankbait? Now's the time. Right now, first part of March, almost anywhere you go in the country, now's that time when you want to start thinking more into cranking, and it's even going to be getting more into jigs and creature baits a little bit later, which we'll talk about maybe next week. But for right now, in my mind, I'm starting to think crankbait a little bit. First warm spells happen, water's slowly starting to warm up. It's getting daylight here. It's daylight a little bit longer, and I'm looking to start catching those quality fish on a crankbait, and the jerkbait bite will become less of a factor week after week moving into March. So anyway, that's today's tip a little bit. There is that transition all over the country. Pay close attention to it, because if you don't, you'll miss out on it. And try a little bit of both. Just mix it up. Don't put the jerkbait away. Don't focus on one or the other heavily, but go out and throw a jerkbait for an hour, and then go throw a crankbait for an hour, and compare the two. And then you'll start seeing sort of how that transition takes place, on your particular body of water. So anyway, hope those tips helped out a little bit. Again, thanks for tuning into the channel. Appreciate it. If you like this video, hit that like button, and please subscribe if you haven't. Much appreciated, and we'll be back tomorrow with another video. See you.